Hello everybody, Adam Clery from FourFourTwo here, and Newcastle United, man, they are so back. They are so back. And that's the entire intro. Okay, so last night a Newcastle United team looking a shadow of their former selves and terrible away from home, playing Aston Villa side that are just usually absolutely brilliant and brilliant at home. Only one outcome there, right? Well, no, not quite. This side, still ravaged by injury and down to the bare bones, dominated Villa for long parts when they needed to, and then defended really well for the last part of the game. They got a really, really good 3-1 win and looked, dare I say it, back to their best, back to the team that got into the top 4 last season. And very, very simply put, the reason they looked so good against Villa and have looked so not good in recent months is because last night they were really brave. What they've been doing to teams all season is having really nice controlled possession at the back, inviting teams onto them, and then, surprise, moving one of their wide players, usually McGinn, and last night it was Tielemans, I think, was on the left, into the centre, where there's theoretically a lot of room for them, and then either hitting a ball directly into them as they've found the space, or, if they're tracked by their marker, hitting the ball into the space they've vacated, where one of the forwards then spins off. We've done like 3 videos on this already, but the bottom line is, in that first half of the season, if you were wondering why Villa suddenly looked like title challengers, it was because nobody knew how to deal with this. But Newcastle United did know how to deal with this, and the way they dealt with it was by being really brave. In order to get the angles they need for this controlled possession, Villa effectively have a narrow 3 of Martinez and the 2 centre-backs in the box, and then a wider 3 of the 2 full-backs and usually Douglas Luiz just outside it. So Newcastle just really aggressively went man for man with them. The 2 wide attackers, they joined Isak right on the edge of the box. You would literally see them standing in this exact shape, waiting to charge them. And then the midfielders wouldn't necessarily go man for man straight away, but would take a second line just behind them. And as soon as the ball hit the fullbacks, you'd then see Longstaff or Miley immediately charging out to close them down. Now, Villa, to an extent, do want teams to do this, because you can see here, if you're defending that way, you've committed 6 whole players up this end of the field, leaving loads of room. So when they do get a bit of space, they'll then hit it long. It's part of their game plan. But what Newcastle did differently, which other teams either haven't thought of or haven't been able to do successfully against Villa, is 2 things. Firstly, they were super aggressive in this part of the pitch. They hounded Aston Villa when they were on the ball. They never gave them the time or space required to get their head up and pick an accurate pass, which meant that time and time again, when Villa did go long from this position, the ball was quite easily mopped up. It went out of play. It wasn't their usual sort of laser-focused attack. And secondly, for all the players left over, they again went man to man. Just to illustrate this point, right, this is John McGinn's heat map from that match. Fairly typical for him at Villa. He will start wide, but also he drifts inside to receive that ball. That's pretty much what he does every single game. And this is Dan Burns' heat map from that match. It's almost pretty much up to sort of like the centre of the pitch, where he would just pass him on to somebody else. He has shadowed him absolutely everywhere. Now, look, if I've made this sound really simple, like, oh, just aggressively press them here and then go man for man there, it's not that easy at all. Everybody would do this to Villa. It's very difficult to do, and because you're so man for man and you're so reliant on this intensity, if anybody gets spun or done or loses their man, if there's any failing anywhere in this, you're in deep. Now, the way they attacked was fairly straightforward. Aston Villa famously have a very high line. Newcastle would look to sort of get the ball between either Bruno, Cher, or Trippier, 3 players who have got like a nice long-range pass in them. And then Gordon, Isak, Murphy, even sometimes Longstaff, they would look to get in behind and they'd hit them over the top. But while it's quite straightforward, it is still quite a brave way to play, because Villa will dominate possession. They will tire you out with their passing, so you've just got it back, and now you're going to hit a low percentage pass over the top and maybe just give it back to them. The temptation would be to retain the ball, but every single time Newcastle could work the ball out to this side, they would hit that ball. And in the same way that the bravery they had with their press ball fruit defensively, the bravery they had with their passing, always looking to get in behind, got them both of the corners that they scored from. But just as if you were at a post-punk revival concert circa around 2006 and had not heard an honest mistake yet, the bravery was not finished there. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Hello? Too niche, was it, that one? Yes, I thought it might be. Newcastle United, a team that has been counter-attacked on more than anybody else in the Premier League this season, went into both those corners from which they scored with a man over. Aston Villa, when they are defending these, always leave 2 up, and Newcastle saw that and just thought, nah. And as a result, both goals come from the fact that they just have more players around the goal mouth than Aston Villa did. Could do a whole video breaking this down, but Villa really do prioritise blocking off the front post, so they always zonally put men there, regardless of whether or not the opposition does. As a result, this makes it quite easy to overload at the back post and jostle and create space. And just look at the moment Fabian Schär scores this goal. Yes, he is being marked by 2 players, so he's the least likely player in this scenario to score that goal, but there are 2 free men around him, mere just feet from the goal. Like, it's kind of weird in a way. It shouldn't be Fabian Schär who scores that goal, but if the ball does drop into that area, Newcastle should almost certainly score anyway. And even if you look at the second goal, which you would say is a success for Aston Villa, because they've overloaded that front post and they've cleared the ball from that area, when it goes back to Anthony Gordon, who, oh, what a shock, is standing completely unmarked on the edge of the box. When that shot comes in, Newcastle have 3 players closer to the goal than any Aston Villa defender. There's obviously more than a degree of fortune about the way it ends up in the back of the net, but Newcastle have given themselves the best possible chance of having some of that fortune by committing extra players into the box for the set piece. Like, as an aside for this, Aston Villa are second in the league this season for the number of set piece goals they've conceded. So they concede loads, but they're right down the bottom, I think like 3rd or 4th bottom, for the total number of set-piece chances they concede. And I mean, I don't know about you, but my interpretation of that data would be that a lot of teams are reluctant to commit men forward on these set pieces because Villa are leaving men up the pitch, so you kind of want to guard against that counter-attack. But when teams are brave enough to do that, because they end up with a man advantage in the box, they score loads of goals, way more than they would normally. But anyway, back to Newcastle, right? So they were really, really brave in every single element of their play against Aston Villa, just like they were last season, and it got them a really good result, just like the kind of results they were getting last season. So why now? Why suddenly so brave? Why suddenly back to their best? Well, and I know Newcastle United fans were really sick of hearing this the last couple of months, because trust me, I was really sick of talking about it, but it's the injuries, or more specifically, it's the levels of tiredness. What some people may call brave, and I'm aware I did just call it brave, so I am some people. What some people may call brave, others may just call having the required energy levels to implement a strategic plan. Newcastle United pressed up really aggressively against Aston Villa and went man for man in their own defensive third because they trusted themselves to have the energy to keep doing that for the whole game. Newcastle United worked really hard to win the ball back in their own half and then played really long diagonal balls over the top for their attackers to chase because they had the energy to win those races. And more importantly, Newcastle United were really happy to push all the way up, to commit extra men into the box for set pieces, to leave themselves open to counterattacks, because for the first time in months, they trusted themselves to be able to work back the other way. Simply being tired isn't an excuse for a Premier League team to fall completely off the boil, but tiredness does impact Newcastle in a way it doesn't really impact a lot of other teams. Their system is so dependent on pushing as many players forward possible to make up for the fact a lot of them are still quite technically limited compared to their rivals at the top of the league. But then, if they get caught out because they've overcommitted bodies, everybody works back as hard as possible. And the problem they've had is with the insane fixture congestion and the injury list meaning they were unable to rotate, they were sticking to this plan all through sort of October, November, December, just for limited parts of matches. And that's why you kept seeing them take an early lead in games and look really good, but then just retreat into themselves and get more and more defensive and eventually concede a heartbreaking late equaliser or winner. You still call it a winner if it's against you, don't you? It's not like a losing goal. A winning goal? You know what I mean. It's just to show you how bad it was, right? Basically, Newcastle had 22 players in that squad that could be relied upon to start matches. You had 2 in every single position, except I've got Lewis Hall here because they only had 3 centre-backs and he was sort of spare. So basically, more or less 2 in every position. So in this first run between October and November, Newcastle had 7 games in 22 days, an average rest time between matches of 2.3 days, and of those 22 players, 12 of them were injured at one stage or another. And this here is just where the whole season started to implode. In December, they had 10 games in 30 days, just 3 days on average to rest between matches, and they had to play teams like PSG, Man United, Chelsea, Tottenham, Milan, like all the crunch. Champions League ties were there. There was massive games in the league. It just felt like week on week, Newcastle were playing the biggest match of their season. And again, in that window, 13 of those 22 players were injured at one stage or another. And hence it started off okay against Chelsea, PSG and Man United, 2 wins and a draw. But after that, they only beat Fulham across those next 7 games. They went out of the Carabao, they went out of the Champions League, they fell all the way down the table. They just couldn't play. Here's a fun bit of maths for you, right? There's 22 games there and 22 players. That gives you a total of like 484 available players in matches. Like, I know only 11 can play, but technically you should have 484 players to choose from across 22 games. That does make sense, right? Like 22 players over 22 games, you should have like 484 options to change the system or to rest players. You should have that much sort of playing resource available. Well, in those 3.5 months of Newcastle's 484 playing options, they were without 216 of them. Meaning they had to play what was arguably one of the most critical periods of football in the club's entire history without 45% of the playing resource they should have had to do it. Or just to put that another way, right? Let's say for the sake of argument that 45% of 22 players is 10 players, right? That meant for 3.5 months, Newcastle had, on average, every single game, 12 footballers. And they didn't get to choose which ones they were. And then not only did they only have 12 players, but for 3.5 months, those 12 players were getting about 3 days rest in between every game. Never mind why aren't they higher up the table, dear viewer. The question should be, for those that didn't miss a minute of that, like Bruno or Cher, why are they still alive? So yeah, there you go. If you want to know why Newcastle United are so back, it's because in the month of February, they only have 5 games. They've got an average rest time of like 6.5 days between them as well. And when this team can run, this team can win. Now though, very quickly before you go, if you have enjoyed this video, please genuinely, honestly, truly, madly do consider subscribing to us here at FourFourTwo on YouTube. It's the one metric that does really, really help us out. And we are a cigarette paper away from breaking the monthly new subscribers record, and that would make me do this. Either way though, get me on Twitter at Adam Clery, C-L-E-R-Y, FourFourTwo socials in the corner of the video. Latest issue of the magazine is just out of reach, so I can't show you it, but it's got Alex Ferguson on the cover. Boo, you can go pick that up from all good news agents, and the bad ones too. But until next time, I've been Adam Clery. Felt like I had something else to tell you. Oh well, I'll text you. Bye.